3 out of our 4 normal crew. Diane, of course, our lovely flight attendant. Eric is not here. He's off tending to some family business. And Dieter, of course, is here because he's always here, except when he isn't. And when he isn't, we have trouble.
But
so
I'm somewhere.
we try to chain him to his desk.
It shows when he's not here.
Anyway, so this is, let me put the logo up there so it looks a little bit like I know what I'm doing. I know if you're regulars, I can't fool you anymore.
In case this is your first time here on the channel, welcome. This is, if Ron finds it, this is our weekly Fearless Flight live show. And we're really excited to have some good stories. And I can say, I'm one of those people that I love virtues, and I think lovely Diane has a virtue for us that's going to be super important that you can pack into your suitcase when you're traveling this summer. Ron, how we're doing on the?
Fortunately, you can't see behind the scenes. A completely new PowerPoint popped up, so let me see if I'll give it one more. God, it's always fun being Laurel and Hardy and I'm unfortunately I play both characters most of the time. So, all right, so I'm gonna do that. Now I'm gonna go share, and we'll be back in business. And we've got a lovely guest tonight, so she's probably feeling all of this chaos. Hopefully, she's laughing at this point in time. So, here, if I get the right one, desktop number 3. Voila!
There we go.
All right, yay! Welcome everybody, Capt Ron and the crew, Fearless Flight weekly show. This is our episode number lumpty nump. I don't know how we have to count them sometime.
We're at I think this is episode number 28 of season 7, if you can believe it or not.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even count.
Longer than Friends has been on, or Gunsmoke, or anything.
Yeah, and the first ones, I don't know if Dieter remembers that. He said, just get your iPhone out, set it up on the kitchen counter, and just start it and then go live. Oh my God. And for him, that was no big deal. For me, it was like, are you kidding me? Anyway, so the whole thing felt like a blooper roll. But anyway, so welcome.
Nothing but outtakes, right?
Yeah. So this is the place to come if you have a fear of flying, if you know somebody who does, or if you just like to keep in touch, at least through us, with the airline industry, and people. I'm starting to get a lot of great feedback from people who've joined our Fearless Flight Birds of a Feather private Facebook group. So we've had a couple of free webinars for people in the group. All you got to do is join up. We'd love to have more. The more, the merrier. And there's a lot of support in there, and we'll touch on that because our guest has some experience with that as well. Tonight's show, we're gonna. I got a lot of heroes. One of them is going to be our special guest, Ali Anderson, and I'm going to highlight the 201 live monthly group coaching webinar again. And the theme is quieting the noise. And I'll touch on that a little bit. And then Diane has actually she's going to be first. She's going to be higher in the program. She's got some experiences that will some helpful hints with all of you. And then, as always, if you've got questions, please put them in the remarks if you're on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll do our best to answer them. So we had to show this cute little slide. Diane's a cat person, and we're calling it Diane's Diary unless one of you comes up with a cuter nickname. So anyway, tell the story, right?
Yeah, well, number one about the cat, that's one of my 2 cats. That's Jake, and that's a carton of yogurt in the background. And yogurt on his face with always the expression, I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you staring at me? That sort of thing. Anyway, exactly. So to start off with, just on Sunday, I just finished a 3-day trip, and Captain Ron, he's got an addition with his travels with Allie. But on Sunday was the last day of my 3-day trip, and we were flying from Seattle, from SeaTac, back to Phoenix. And when we got to the airport from our hotel that morning, we all commented, the four of us, crew members, 2 pilots, 2 flight attendants, on how busy it was. And I said that I had never, ever in my life in a domestic airport seen that many people. It was unbelievable. It was so crowded. And this morning, I still get the newspaper. And this morning in the newspaper, there was an article that says, TSA screens record 3 million passengers in a single day. The Transportation Security Administration said it screened 3.01 million airline passengers on Sunday, the highest number ever on a single day. And so we weren't making it up. It really was the busiest I'd ever seen it. We had ever seen it. And according to this article and everything we've experienced, it's going to be like that for the rest of the summer. There are more people flying now than even prior to COVID. We all are, Ron is as well, just floored by the numbers of people that have come back to flying. And so for me as a flight attendant, a number of suggestions. The most important thing to pack if you're flying this summer, anytime certainly, but most importantly this summer, is to pack your patience. You have to be patient. Things are going to happen when we have this many people. There are areas in aviation where we need more people. And so some of the deficiencies in the numbers, not the ability, but the numbers of people are causing some delays in some aspects of scheduling and all those kinds of things. So do be patient with all of those kinds of things. Another thing, right now it's 115 degrees in Phoenix. And that has a couple of different effects. One is if the air conditioning is working good on the plane, chances are we're going to have it cranked down as cool as we can. And we still get people who ask for blankets. I started flying 5 years ago. When I started, we had blankets on some of the planes. There hasn't been a blanket on a plane ever. So do be prepared, because even though it's very warm outside, the aircraft itself could be very cold. And we don't have anything that will help you. So you need to bring a sweater, a light blanket, something. And at the same time, don't overpack the bags you bring on the aircraft. Some of the planes have big bins. My planes do not. And we don't want to have to gate check your bag, but we may have to if you've decided to bring everything, including the kitchen sink, with you in a backpack. So do be mindful of that sort of thing. The other thing right up there with the numbers, as far as flight attendants and gate agents and the pilots, we'd have no control over what gate you depart from. Okay. So if gates change, please don't take it out on us. Please don't take it out on the gate agents, the pilots, anyone. Those are operational situations that we have no control over. We don't have control over the seats on the aircraft. If you don't like the seat you're in, I'm sorry, you probably purchased it and chose it that way. There are some airlines, mine's one of them, I can't move people willy-nilly around my plane. I can't do it. We have different seats that are premium seats, and the only people that really can deal with those kinds of things are the gate agents. So if you have a concern, you're not sitting with a family member or a child or something, please don't ask us. Please deal with that situation with the gate agents, the customer service agents. They're the individuals. They're the first line. They're the ones really who can make a difference. And we also, along with all of that, we have nothing to do with the delays. We cannot change mechanical issues, maintenance issues, all of those kinds of things. And as an example of that, on this last trip that I had, I want to say we were in Los Angeles, and the APU, and Captain Ron, please step in for a minute and explain what the APU is, and then bring it back to me and I'll tell them. It wasn't working.
It's the APU.
I shouldn't have even asked.
Hey, wait, I could have said that too.
I know, I could have figured that one out. Okay, could you?
A couple of things. One, the blanket situation, it's like the movies in Phoenix. It's hotter than blazes outside. You go in the movie theater and they freeze you out. So airplanes the same way. We can cool it when we get to altitude because we got minus 55-degree air outside. So worst comes to worst, we pump that in. And then the APU, the APU, Yeah, that's a little mini jet engine, and I don't know why I feel compelled, but that's the motor. That was the main motor on the first jet trainer that I flew. We always used to laugh. So we had two of the APU jet engines. When I got in the airlines, they said, "Oh, that was the engine on the first airplane I flew." But anyway, so we have those things, and when you're sitting at the gate, certainly with the energy conservation, the airplanes, as much as possible, they hook up to the electricity from the terminal, and if the terminal has air conditioning in a tube from the jetway that they can put into the airplane, they'll hook that up. So that's how they keep it cool and fresh for you when you get out there. And plus, everybody pulls down their shades now. Right. But sometimes you get an airplane and the APU is not working. And I have, and Diane's part of her story here was I'll save that for her. But if it's not working, it can be up to the discretion of the captain, so I don't want you to beg your captain to turn down the airplane. The APU's not working.
But these are things that we deal with. These are things that we deal with before the passengers get on. I mean, we want to make sure we take care of that even before the passengers. Anyway, the four of us got on our aircraft and the APU wasn't working, and the aircraft itself was stifling inside. And they tried to get it as cool as they could. They didn't have we know of what you're talking about. They can have ancillary air conditioning. They take a big hose and they put it in and try to super cool it quickly. They couldn't do that. And so our captain, he was taking the temperature inside the aircraft, and in the back where I'm usually the aft flight attendant, it was a little over 100 degrees, which is, as you can imagine, totally unacceptable. And so what he did was he refused the aircraft. And we wound up getting a different aircraft at a different gate. So when things like that happen, that's beyond the control of all those kinds of people. And in that instance, our captain just saved all of us. He really did. And certainly did the right thing by ensuring that our airplane was obviously it was flight worthy, but it was not going to be comfortable and safe for our passengers or for the crew. And so those are the kinds of things that happen behind the scenes before passengers ever board the plane. So aviation is so not complicated, but there's so many moving parts that
complex.
I was going to say, just you as a passenger are not necessarily privy to the millions of moving parts that are going to go on. So, and that goes all the way back to what I said to begin with. Please pack your patience.
And if you're anxious, those are the things that will trigger it. So, was that in Seattle where the airplane the AP wasn't working?
No, LA. It was at LAX.
LA. Okay, so LA. And LA, every place has been hot, but when you have coastal cities like LA and especially Seattle, I was talking to Allie and I might talk about this, but they don't even have air conditioning in some places because traditionally there was only a few times during the day that they would use it or during the year. Yeah. Now that's not the case, man. With the temperatures that are showing up around the country, people need that. So, and the other thing I'll say about the delays, when Diane was alluding to that, is I flew yesterday with Allie, who's going to come up for a minute, and 2 out of the 3 flights that I had, she made 1, but I made 3, were delayed, no pilots. And so you say, how can they not have pilots? That's because in the old days, when we had the same work rules, pilots always made more than flight attendants. So it wasn't about equal pay, but it was about equal work rules. So we all got credit for the same part. Then they started making the pilots, they responded to our complaints. So we got better work rules and the flight attendants didn't. So now and then we got computer bidding. So now the computer said, not going to keep you together all the time because it's not efficient. I don't get to work the flight attendants as hard as to keep you together with the pilots. So when they did that, then that introduced a whole new notion. And that is airplane gets there, flight attendants happen, maybe or maybe not, we're on that airplane, but the pilots are coming in on another one. And if their flight's late, doesn't matter whether your airplane's there or not. And that happened twice yesterday to me.
Oh, yeah. Now, with our airline, the 4 of us stay together more than a lot of the other airlines. So we probably have fewer instances of the pilots timing out. And you could probably explain that too, about timing out and why that is part of a delay situation.
Yeah, so timing out. So both the pilots and the flight attendants have limited crew duty days. So when you get to that limit, and it used to be, even if you went over on your last leg, they'd let you fly it. Now not so. Now they project forward. So if it's going to take you over into your turn into a pumpkin time, then they'll stop the trip. So this didn't happen to us, but it could be if the flight attendants sat there long enough and they'd had a long day to start with. Even when the pilots got there, it might push them in. So now we might have to, and you'll see this sometimes if you have additional delays. Now you got to get new flight attendants, and you're saying, "Oh my gosh, we just had to wait on the pilots." You tell me now we got to get flight attendants? Yeah, but it's all in the interest of safety.
Safety.
And so
right.
We're
One quick thing, this is several years ago when I was on reserve. I was sitting at the gate waiting to catch a flight, obviously to work a flight. And because of the timing out, I went through 2 captains and 1 first officer. They kept timing out. And I'm like, by the time we got on the plane, I was the only original person that was assigned to the trip. So that's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Anyway,
And
we just had a comment here and a question. So that happened to Donna as well, apparently. So their flight was delayed, and then I guess delayed long enough that the flight attendant had reached the limit. So then they then they had to wait for a new crew. So and for some reason Donna it triggered her apparently, because she's thinking, well, you know, nobody has time to prepare because everybody was scrambling. So how is that any more safe?
safe.
So I don't know how you guys can answer
crew
that.
gets on, you still got to go through your pre-flight. So we had a very thoughtful captain last night on my last leg. He comes on board. He says, "Hey, sorry, we were late coming in. That's the reason it was unavoidable. And you give us about 20 minutes. We'll run through our stuff." So he alerted people to that fact. But that's true. Just because we're late doesn't allow us to say, "I feel good about this flight." Kick the tires, light the fires, and we're on.
It doesn't work like that. We are required to do. I mean, the flight attendants are required. We have our own pre-flight inspection, and it doesn't matter if the flight attendant that was on there in the same position on the aircraft had gone through it when he or she boarded. When I take over the plane, that's my plane now, and I am responsible for my part of the aircraft. Doesn't matter if Susan got off the plane and she said, "Yeah, everything works fine." I have to prove it to myself, because at that point, I am now responsible for everything. So as Ron said, we're required to do that. So it's not that we're trying to make a delay worse. It's that we have to do that for our for safety.
Yeah, and boarding won't commence until Diane and her team members have done the checks. Whereas you could be sitting in the back. When we come on board, you can't see us, so we can't embarrass ourselves or cause you to wonder whether we know what we're doing. And so we will do our checks there when we get in there, out of view of you, but you might be on the airplane already. So that's
Ron, there's another question. Why does the airline deplane the entire aircraft if it's the same connection and the plane to go to the next destination? This happened twice in Texas recently. We got off the plane just to have a 15-minute turnaround and get back on the same plane. It's a good
question.
I'm
not sure completely, but if I understand, whoever that was, let me know if this is correct or not correct. So I'm assuming they came in on that airplane, and they were scheduled, and as it turns out, they went out on that airplane, but they had to deplane everybody in the meantime.
That's all the information I have. And Melissa, if you want to clarify anything, but yeah, go ahead.
Without knowing any more details, here's how that could happen. You come in there and you are scheduled to go out on a different airplane. However, that airplane didn't make it. And then so back in dispatch, wherever the dispatchers are, they look at that, they go, "I got one of these, one missing here," or stuff like that. Oh, we use the same airplane. So they might have deplaned you before they realized that the other airplane you're supposed to switch into was not there. That's just one possible explanation.
I'm wondering if they deplaned everyone and then end-planed everyone? I was wondering, or
That's
if
what it
She
sounded
said,
like.
yes, we got off the plane
I'm just wondering if
just
everyone
to get back on a few minutes later. So,
got back on.
yeah, and she did say deplaned the entire aircraft. So,
Yeah.
so
And
that's
so we can't know completely for sure, but that stuff happens, and that's where I can't emphasize enough to pilots. It really helps if they get on the airplane and they say, you might have thought it was a little strange if you rode in on this airplane with us and now you got off and come back. It's just to explain that, because any uncertainty in a human being's mind, they will make up a story. And if you happen to have anxiety over flying, that story might be, well, it was really not up to snuff, but then they said, I think it can make it anyway. No, that's not what we do. But it's what the human mind will do. So again, if you got this, thanks for the question. Thanks for the details as much.
I'm kind of curious to get the details myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've had that where you come in and either the connecting airplane didn't come, or you came in with a write-up on it and they thought that they would handle it or be able to get you on another airplane, and it turns out no, and then they had to fix it. So if we knew how long it was between coming in and boarding the airplane, that might be different.
There's some things that, of course, you know better than me, that you can fly one leg, and
right,
and then you have to put the plane out of service. And there's some things, of course, if you write it up, then we can't go at all. But some things you can only fly one leg, and if it actually becomes okay, not that bad, then. But anyway, question.
There are a myriad of rules in ferry flights. We call it when we move a plane from point A to point B without passengers, a ferry flight. So sometimes I've been on airplanes. You go in, something breaks, and then they say, okay, it's out of service, but we can fly it back to maintenance to get it fixed. Sometimes you can take the flight attendants. Sometimes even the flight attendants can't go. Sometimes the flight attendants can go, and not company employees who are waiting to non-rev can go, but not paying passengers. The rules get complex, but they're very.
So that's interesting. That's an interesting thing, because Melissa just said it actually happened both ways to her. So from Phoenix to Houston, and then Phoenix to Houston to Florida, and then from Florida to Dallas to Phoenix. So
what airline? Curious what airline?
I was going to say, what airline? We need to know the airline.
I know now everyone's curious, but I can answer this other question. Is it good to keep flying planes back to back? And as a matter of fact, that is the entire revenue model of Southwest, right? Like constantly.
All of them. But Southwest has the long-standing highest utilization.
Oh, it was Southwest, guys. So she did well on us.
Well, they have through flight.
So my answer to that was fly United next time. Whatever, I know. But it's hard. It's hard to say. It's hard to say. But we had delays, and I don't want to steal a thunder from when Ellie and I talked, but it's not just pilots sometimes, or a shortage of pilots. It's a shortage of everybody. Ground crew, they're having trouble staffing the airlines, and
everyone.
And then the hot weather and the increased utilization, because the airlines are trying to make money with all these people out there, and it's crazy. I don't want to say insane, because then some of you think it's not safe, but that's not true. The reason we have delays is because you just can't cut corners, when it comes to pre-flight and things like that, and maintenance. But there are a wide variety of exceptions to maintenance and what you can fly, delays and things like that. And it would be interesting to find out on the Southwest.
And I'm just gonna quickly plug our How to Overcome Fear of Flying book, because they do keep track of every cycle, and a cycle is takeoff and landing. So there are certain checks that are being performed if a certain amount of duty cycles is being hit, because actually the airplane flying is the least stress on the plane. It's the takeoff and the landing that is most stressful. And so there's A, B, C, D checks that these planes go through. So they keep track of all of that, Melissa, and then based on how many times that plane has started and landed, it'll be inspected, on that. So
as Dieter said, we keep track of the cycles because that's an important number, and the total hours on the airplane. Because as Dieter alluded to, the main stress on the airplane is from pressurizing the cabin. It literally blows up the cabin like a balloon a little bit, and the work that the engines are producing, the highest temperatures, and those take place on takeoff. So takeoffs and landings are really important because you might have airplanes that are international. Typically, they might fly, in a day, one takeoff, one landing, but 15 hours of time on the airframe. And then you might have another airplane that flies 15 times during the day, same 15 hours, but it has 15 takes. Well, that would be a little bit
ups and downs. Yeah.
But maybe half of that or a third of that. So cycles are important, and they're both of them are rated. The number of times the gear goes up and down is why we do the cycles as well. So anyway, okay. Yeah, great questions. Thanks for that out there. So let's I just got a couple of slides here if I can. Am I sharing? Please tell me I'm sharing.
There's Diane's diary.
Okay, so just a quick advertisement. This Thursday, remember, it is the 4th Thursday this month, normally the 3rd, July 25th this month, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. I've got some really great new information about chatter, stopping the noise, changing the things that you say to yourself. When you think about flying and flight anxiety, it's really the little voice in your head that keeps you busy and keeps you frightened. And so I've been reading some research and some actual tools and techniques on how to change that for yourself. And they're amazingly simple. I found out that I've done some of them naturally in my life, and you may find that too. So you may have to just tweak your behavior a little bit and to put it into play, or it may be really newfound information for you. But in either case, it'll be interesting, I guarantee you. So please consider joining us. And overcoming your fear of flying is not a one-time deal for most people. Some people are lucky enough to have a breakthrough and everything is smooth sailing after that. But most of us, when we're trying to change our behavior, it happens over time. And so that's why we started the monthly membership, and we encourage people to participate with that. Okay. So again, stopping the noise, changing the things you say to yourself, and strategies associated with that. Okay. So this is me, and I have to apologize to Allie. I took some video of our closing ceremony with the certificates and all that, and then I realized that when I pressed the video, I turned it off instead of on. So once again, I can fly airplanes way better than I can work my phone and all that. But anyway, so with that, I'm gonna stop the share, bring Allie into the room here with us. Hey, Allie. Boy, did we had some kind of fun yesterday, right?
Yes, we did. Listening to Diane talk about the hot airplane. It was and abnormally hot in Seattle yesterday, and I had packed clothes that were not, I was planning on weather in 60s, 70s maybe, but it was in the 80s and so hot. And so we were just dying, and then the airplanes had sat outside and was hot, and so I could totally I don't think it was quite as hot as 100 degrees in the cabin, but it felt like it for a few minutes there.
It was probably 90 at least. And when it gets to 90, and in one of the things that I noticed early on in my career, we'd be flying along, and I was with the original Frontier, so we had a lot of northern tier country or airports in the winter, like Great Falls, Montana, Billings, and North Dakota, stuff like that. And it was colder than a well digger's butt in some of those places, and that's cold. And so you'd be freezing and all that. And then, but we would actually, you could tell how full you were by managing the cockpit. Of course, we have the controls for the cabin temperature up there. And if we were empty, we'd have to crank that thing all the way up to get all the heat that we could to the people in the back. But if it was a full flight, you could back it off a little bit because you get enough body heat. So not only is it important to cool down the airplane when it's hot weather out there, but when you add a bunch of bodies in there, it adds to that heat that's there. So it makes it really uncomfortable. So anyway, so enough about that. So just a little bit of an intro. Allie is somebody that I've known. Oh my God, did we meet before the pandemic or was it after? Do you remember?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think it was maybe just after.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, just a delightful person. It's just another example of why I love doing this. You get the most sincere, divine, committed people to do this, and it's just such an intimate experience to have people share their soul about that. And we end up talking about a lot of things beyond, based on the willingness of the participants, other than fear of flying. But anyway, so Allie is one of those, and Allie and I had flown before together. She did a lot of work on her own, and then I tried to talk her out of it, but at one point in time she said, I will fly with you. So I'm going to let her talk a little bit about that evolution. And we flew, and then she had a vacation yesterday, and you hadn't flown since the last time we flew. Was that it?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Okay. So with that, go ahead, Allie. Just tell people a little bit about how you got it, how you noticed it, and what you've done.
Well, I used to love flying, actually. I never had an issue with it. I went my whole life up to a certain point where I had no problem with flying. I actually flew, my husband and I, before we had our daughter, traveled all over. We went to Europe. We went to Bali, which was a 16-hour flight, the first leg, and then it was another 5. So it was over almost a 24-hour flight. Fell asleep on the plane, no problem. And then we took a vacation right before, about a year, maybe a year or so, less than a year before I had my little girl. And we were coming back from Hawaii, and it was a storm, and it was just turbulent the whole way. And not just turbulent, like, a few bumps. It was, flight attendants had to be seated, and it didn't get better. And we were in the very back of the plane, and it was just a terrible experience, and really just made it difficult for me to get on a plane after that flight. So that's what led me to researching what I could do to get over it, because I love to travel so much. But to do that, you sort of have to be willing to get on an airplane. And so I started researching and came across Capt Ron, and that's kind of how we got started. So
What was that the first kind of things that you did, talking to me, or did you try anything else?
No, I had tried other things. There was another pilot, I forget his name, but he made a program called SOAR. And yes, and I read his book and tried some of those things. His methods were, I'm sure for some people they work wonderfully, but for me they were odd. Like I remember he wanted you to imagine like a cartoon on the ceiling of the plane, and just things that for me personally weren't going to work. I downloaded and listened to a lot of self-help books, and just kind of did research on my own about, YouTube videos on aviation safety and different things like that. But it just wasn't, I just felt like I was doing a lot of spinning my wheels, where I was spending a lot of time, trying to find something that was really going to help. And it just, I couldn't, nothing really was doing the trick. So I was very excited when I found FearlessFlight and Capt Ron, because it's an actual captain in person that you can speak with and get to know, and the 201 course. And then eventually decided that the elite coaching was going to be the best option for me. And that, that was a big choice for me and my family, because my husband is an accountant. So I'm sure you can imagine that when I went to him and I said, and I should back up a little bit. He was on this same flight back from Hawaii, and he and I are different in a lot of really wonderful ways. And one of those is that he was able to get off that flight, and I think he was rattled, but he flew a couple more times and was, pretty well over it. I mean, maybe still not totally comfortable on a plane, but at least to a point where he could get on the plane without all this anxiety and panic attacks. And because that's what was happening to me when I tried to fly after that flight back from Hawaii. We did a couple flights.
He's what I would call a nervous flyer, and what that means is, when everybody gets bothered a little bit from time to time, clear our turbines, stuff like that. But a nervous flyer, you know, they can bounce back more. But
Yes.
some people, they're like, no, you just don't bounce back.
Yeah, my brain just wasn't working that way. It was every time now that I went onto an airplane, it was sending off these alarm bells of like, no, this is not a safe situation. You need to get off. So, you know, went through what I'm sure a lot of people listening can relate to, where I canceled flights, or I would get on the flight and I just would be shaking and, you know, having a full-on panic attack on the flight that, you know, my husband, maybe he was nervous, but he definitely wasn't experiencing it to that degree. So, I think when I sat down with him and I said, look, this is what I want to do, he was very skeptical, because for him it was, well, why can't you just shake it off? You know, just get on some flights. Why do you need to go through this whole process? And he just didn't understand it. But when I broke it down for him and I said, look, this is obviously something that it's a mental health thing and it's an emotional health thing for me. It's because it's going beyond just logic. Because I know logically flying is safe and I could tell myself that, but when I get inside an airplane, that's gone. My brain could not hang on to that logic. And that's really what the struggle was. And that's how, you know, and that's a vulnerable thing to have to admit, to say it is a mental health and an emotional health issue. You know, you sort of feel kind of like it makes you feel kind of bad about yourself in a way. At least for me, it does. But so I said, you know,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was going to say, look, I'm either going to need to do some therapy specific to flight to be able to get back on a plane, because I was determined to still be able to get back on a plane. And when I broke that down for him and I said, look, here's how many sessions I would probably have to do with a therapist. Here's about what they charge per session. And then here's the coaching proposal. But with Ron, this is a specific, you know, this is tailored to my specific issue. And that's really what I needed, because you can go to a therapist and they can be wonderful, but maybe they're scared of flying themselves, or they don't know anything about aviation or that component of it that can be helpful. And so working with Ron was so advantageous for me, because it kind of combined that, because not only does he talk a lot about the aviation aspect of things, but he also brings in, you know, and it has a lot of understanding and knowledge about the mental side of it, which I think for most people, at least as I've, you know, been in this group now for a few years, it seems as though most people could say, I know the airplane is safe, but it's that logic leaves when you walk onto the airplane. And that's really, I think, what it's hard to find somebody that can kind of combine that, you know, fuse the two, where you're getting that mental health component, but also the aviation knowledge. So it was, it was worth every investment. And now my husband, I think we just did a cruise and flew back yesterday from Alaska. And I think Sam, my husband, was almost sad that when we flew there, Ron didn't join us on the cruise ship. Come do the whole vacation.
Yeah, imagine you get to take me with you on your vacation. You know,
that would be great.
That's creepy even for me. So, but I have.
All that to say, though, my skeptical husband loves Ron and has seen the fact that it was an investment worth making. You know, because I think it's hard. You really just can't put a price on what's your mental health worth to you? What's your freedom to be able to feel like you can get on a plane and go somewhere and make memories and have, you know, vacation and all these wonderful times that with your family and your kids, you know, there's really just not a price for me that I could put on that. And I think my husband finally came around to that vantage point as well, and saw that it was just worth every piece of the investment that we made, both time and financial commitment. So.
In fairness, it is expensive, and I did it for years when I was actively flying in the airlines. I did it for nothing, and it's not like I, you know, felt like, okay, you got to charge something like that. But after a while, I realized, you know, I wasn't getting the paychecks that I was before. But it's you know, a warning. You're going to be stuck with me for the rest of your life, because it really is. it's even the coaching calls I do with people. I get to know people on such a level. It's a real special privilege, and I treat it like that. But when I do VIP, like with Allie, I mean, she's stuck with me forever, and I become, you know, I mean, we share other stuff, and one of the fun things about flying with somebody is I try to talk about anything but flying, you know, to try to help normalize it and all that. And I got to meet. Well, of course I met Sam before, but I saw her daughter Blair, just absolute doll, and I'm crushed that I screwed up the video there because I had certificates to everybody, and so it was fun at the end doing that.
Yeah. So this was for people that we flew to Cabo a couple years ago, and then flew again this last week. We did a cruise, and so we had to get to Seattle, and so. And I think another thing for me, at least, and maybe for people listening to keep in mind, is that it's really kind of a marathon, not a sprint, to help to get past that point. I mean, we flew to Cabo, and I had Captain Ron sitting next to me, and it was still a challenge. It was still challenging. I mean, I did it, and it was a step forward, but it was still a challenge. This last time we flew, I felt like I took 20 steps forward. And there were still moments where it was challenging, but it's something that I think you have to keep in mind, that you have to keep putting yourself in those situations, and you've got to keep working at it. And whatever support you're able to have to help you do that is just going to make it that much easier and help you be that much more successful. At least that's been my experience too. And when you talk about, you know, the fact that it is expensive, yes, but honestly, like I said, my husband, that's a numbers guy. You know, if you sit down and do the math, it's really, I mean, if you're trying to see a therapist to help you with something like this, and like you say, my experience with Captain Ron too has been, it's not just that he provides a service and then says, okay, well, your time is up, your money's up, we're done, bye. It's not like that at all. You truly do get, he goes above and beyond what you pay for. And I can say that from personal experience. I mean, it's just, it's more like having a good, very dear friend. It's not like working with somebody that says, you know, okay, time's up, 15 minutes is up. Now I've either got to start charging you more money or we're off the phone. You know, it's just, it's so much more, he has so much more care and compassion that it goes beyond that. And for what he puts in, the money, the time and effort extra that he is willing to put in, it's more than a bargain. I mean, truly. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I say, you're stuck with me for life, because I mean, I can tell you everybody I've ever flown with in the VIP program. I'll tell you a lot of people that I've flown with in general, but that, and I understand. I mean, when I make an expense for something, it's not like, you know, it's easy for me to do. And to me, here's the issue I've always had with paying for anything in therapy, let alone fair flying. You know, like, let me get this right. I've got something that I don't believe will work in the first place, and you're telling me I gotta pay you to help you prove to me that it won't work. And to me, it's a no-brainer. Heck no, I'm not going to spend any money on that. But the thing is, you can get over it. And people like Allie, it's inspiring to me. I kid you not, to go with somebody and watch them struggle to get on the airplane, and struggle on occasion. Like when we were flying yesterday, we get a little bit of a buzz from going through a different level, climbing out, and it'd be a little where the two differing atmospheric winds vary a little bit. You get a little bubble. That's what causes turbulence and stuff. And something that I wouldn't even notice if I was sleeping or reading a book, and Allie grips my arm a little bit tighter and all that, you know. And I appreciate, you know. I mean, I've had my own panic attacks in my life. I've had my own issues with anxiety and stuff like that. It just doesn't happen to be related to flying. But I understand what it's like. But I can honestly say, you all taught me how to help people best. And then when Allie made the reference to visualize up in the ceiling, something or other, you know, and all those mindful techniques and all that stuff works. But when the pressure's on and the chips are down and you're getting ready to break through that first thing, either closing the door or taking off or something like that, nobody wants to look at a visualize up there or think of 5 things around the room or things like that. You have to have some really, really good strategies to get through that little bit. And the beauty of it all is when you get through those moments, it gets better. And even if you experience a little bit more anxiety, it's going to get better. So anyway, yeah, we had a typical day. Were we delayed on the flight going up? I think that was routine, wasn't it? 10 days ago or something. But coming back,
the flight, the flight getting there was all on time. Everything was great.
Yeah.
Getting back, I think you were delayed an hour getting to Seattle. Then we were delayed at least 30 minutes to board, and then at least another 30 minutes on the ground, just in the sweltering plane. And then it sounds like you were delayed too, getting back to Phoenix. So
that's another footnote. When I flew from Phoenix to Salt Lake to meet with Allie and Sam and Blair, it was an earlier flight. And so generally speaking, especially if you're the first flight out for that airplane in the morning and it spent the night there, that's the best chance you'll have all day of being on time. If you're going later, which is since I flew up later in the day, it wasn't until 5 o'clock was our scheduled departure time last evening. And by that time, all of the delays and stuff get a chance to kind of like snowballs catch up with you. That's why. So earlier in the day, better typically for turbulence and stuff. Although we had a pretty good flight yesterday with.
It was pretty good. There was a few, and I was thinking about it too, and I thought it's almost like I turn into Spider-Woman or something when I get on a plane because all my senses are just heightened. And so and I was teasing with Capt Ron. I said, they're going to think that you and I are a couple because I'm holding on to him like this. And every time the plane is moving, I'm asking, is that normal? Is that normal? But it was so helpful because, when you're sitting on the ground and taking class about turbulence, that's one thing. But when you're experiencing it in the air, to have somebody that can tell you, well, this is why it's happening. That was so helpful and just brought my anxiety level because I'd shoot up and then it would help bring it back down to be able to say, okay, that's happening because there's a reason, there's something going on that's not involving the plane plummeting to the ground. But to have someone there that can actually explain that was just, again, you can't put a price on that because those are lessons that then I can take with me into a flight that maybe I'll do without gripping Ron's arm, and then I'll be able to carry that into, other flights as I build more confidence. And this last flight, like I say, I feel like I took 100 steps forward towards being, I was so much, I have not been that comfortable on a flight in 5 years. Honestly, it's,
So here's my anxiety. So I'm sitting there. Obviously there's an age difference. Obviously she's hooking on to me like we were more than just 2 strangers. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I hope people at least say, I hope that's his daughter or something. I didn't know I was going to be 77 years old and doing this one day, but so that's what keeps my mind wandering. It's like, oh my God. And there was I have to think there was a story about the former coach of the New England Patriots, Bill Belichick. And he just got exposed for having he's like I think he's the same age as I am. And he has a girlfriend that's 23 or 24. And I'm thinking, so I read that just before we go. And I'm thinking, oh my God, I wanted to say, her husband and daughter are in the back. It's not like you think. So of course, it's flattering on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's like, no. We're doing work here. And right. So,
yeah, Ron and I sat Delta Comfort, and then we put my husband and daughter in the back. And part of that was because I felt like, okay, if I start to panic, I didn't want my daughter to absorb my anxieties and fears because she thinks flying is so fun. But also I wanted the nicer seat. And so, and I will say it did help a bit. I felt like to sit further towards the front of the plane. So if for anyone listening, if that's available to you, I do think that you feel more further towards the back. So I felt like that was a positive thing to, plus the seats are nicer. So,
and she says Delta Comfort, that's a new class of fares, and they take the seats that they have started with just the exit rows, which were naturally a little wider or a little more knee room. Now they are actually putting Delta Comfort seats in the airplane. American does it. All the big airlines do that, except Southwest does it. so that they actually have like another 2 inches of leg room in there. But it does make a difference. And I commented to Ellie when we got on, I said, this is like the old days when I first started, when you had more room. And it makes me remember, oh my God, they really do cram these things in there. But how much, usually it's like between 25 and 45 bucks or something that they charge as a premium. And as Diane was alluding to, now we can't just move people around like that, because now those poor people paid another 45 bucks for that seat and they're not about to give it up. So, and you can't blame them, I guess. So
yeah. But I saw, so after our first flight, I posted on the Facebook page, because I'm part of that group, and there were just a lot of people that commented, and a very common comment I saw was, well, how much does it cost? How much does this cost? That'd be so great for me to be able to do that. And I think that I just would encourage you to just reach out to Captain Ron, get more information about it. If you're even thinking that maybe it would be possible for you to do, I can't say enough how much I just want you to message him and get in touch with him. And he's so easy to talk to, and can, case by case, I think it's all going to depend on how far your flight is and, what exactly the details are. But if you're even thinking or considering it, just reach out and get the information and then go from there. So it's been worth it.
I mean, there's all kinds of things. One of the things, even as Sally was talking here today, I was thinking, how could I do, I might be able to, we get more and more people now, and maybe I could fly someplace and pick up somebody else or something, ways to defer the cost. And so I'm open to anything, and you can spread the payments out and things like that. It's the most rewarding thing I do that, and the classes where we fly with people, because I get real time validation that people can get over this. And it's, people always attribute it to me. I'll take credit for helping them find ways to do this, but you guys did the heavy lifting, and in particular, Ellie. So the last thing I want to say is congratulations, Ellie. You are a hard worker, and it's just fun doing that. And Ellie has actually helped to support me with some ideas that I have on things like this, because that's what I do. I go back to people that I have a really good rapport with, and talk about, does this make sense, and does that make sense, and all that. So join the team, and if you even think you might want to do that, let's talk about it. Okay. All right.
Thanks. You.
Hang in there with us if you want. I got one more thing I want to do before, if I can get the share up here. And this is just kind of a poignant story. This guy we're about the same age probably, and I met him. We ended up, my airline and his airline actually merged towards the end of my career. And I was working in human factors, working with the ways that we can make pilots and people that contribute to the human input on the airplane, mechanics and flight attendants and all that. When that came into the industry, and it's one of the reasons why we have an even safer safety record now. His name's Bob Sumwalt, and he ended up, he was active in the Airline Pilots Association in the union in safety, and then he migrated, and ultimately he got on the National Transportation Safety Board, which is one of the government agencies that I have the highest regard for. They investigate accidents for any mode of transportation. If it's car accidents, enough to get their attention, train accidents, airplanes for sure, and all that. And he became the chairman ultimately on this. And this was a story. I'm in LinkedIn, and so his name pops up. I follow him a little bit. And one of the things that I found fascinating was 30 years ago. This was on July 2nd when he posted this. 30 years ago today, July 2nd, 1994, I was at the hospital with my wife and 1-day-old daughter. So his wife had just had a daughter, and the phone rang, and it was his father-in-law, his wife's brother's father. His father-in-law was on the other end of the line and asked about an air crash in Charlotte. And of course, he was like thinking, he worked for US Air at the time. He said, we haven't had a crash in Charlotte. He must be confused. In reality, it was him that was confused. Minutes later, it hit the national airwaves, US Airways, DC-9 crashed near the Charlotte airport. And his brother-in-law supposedly was a passenger on that flight. And his father-in-law wanted to know if he could find out, get the access to the manifest in the very early moments post-crash analysis, and find out, because 37 of the 57 occupants on the airplane died that day. And he made a comment in there. He said, thanks to improved technology, training, and improved procedural guidance, for flight crews. It was the last of a string of wind shear related crashes with the U.S. airlines. So since that day in, what was it, July 2nd, 1994, 30 years ago, we have not had another airline accident due to wind shear. And that's just the way it is, folks. The industry is really notorious for bringing to the light what caused it, any possible cause, and improve it. And that's why it's so doggone safe out there. And then he wrote, since I posted this, several people have written to me because he didn't mention if his brother-in-law, in fact, was on board. And if so, what happened to him? And this post was about that. I get choked up when I read it, so bear with me. Yes, he was on board. According to the NTSB seating chart, he was in seat 14F. And this is the crazy thing that happens in life. The seating chart indicates that the person in the seat in front of him died, as did the person across the aisle from him. That person also died, as did the 3 people in the row directly behind him. It wasn't a completely full flight, but the people all around him. So the seating chart shows that only 1 passenger several rows ahead of him survived. Everybody else died on that flight. So, for whatever reason, he says, somehow I'll leave it to you to decide how and why Jim survived. He's now a talented rheumatologist and a very caring physician. At that, the 4 kids that were 8 and under when this crash happened are all grown now, and he's a grandfather. So I would just, maybe in a twisted Ron sort of way, I wanted to share that with you all and tell you that that's what life is about. It's about things that you happen over which have no control. I will never tell you that airplanes will not crash. I will tell you they will never crash with the frequency that your mind wants to tell you in that chatter. And if that were the sole reason you didn't get on an airplane, you could never get in your car, as I tell people that come to the classes, and drive home from the airport, because you would be paralyzed with fear. So that's what I want to leave you with today. It's something that I'm sorry that some of you were afflicted by it, but Allie is living proof that you don't have to live with it. And we do our best to keep it safe, and we do our best now to keep you from worrying as much about it. And we'll show you how you don't have to give up your worrying. We'll just show you how to be more creative in it, and promise you that. So, Diane, thanks, Dieter, and thanks to everybody out there. Another edition of who are we? Fearless Flight Live every week. So come back next week. Thanks, everybody, and thanks again, Allie, for being with us. Thanks for sharing, Allie. I really appreciate it. All right, everybody. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, thank you.